The last video we looked at the real centerpiece of Reason, at least for me, or for the DAW itself, which is the sequencer, because that obviously brings together all of the sounds and the effects and the ability to automate and make your music and all of that. What I love about it is its clean, elegant simplicity. Some people don't like that. There are some poor, sad people who would rather run Reason just for its instruments inside another DAW. A little something like this. That was the original fundamental of how Reason got started. It did have a sequencer. It was actually really rather cool, version 1 sequencer. I showed you a picture of it last week. And the thing here is that Reason was designed for sale through Steinberg as an addition for Cubase. So it gave Cubase a whole lot of instruments and effects, which were way better, way more efficient. And along with it, Reason created this technology called ReWire. And ReWire for the time was just stunning. Just as Rex had changed the way people did loopy-loop stuff, chopping samples and what have you, ReWire changed the way that DAWs could interact with each other. Suddenly there was this protocol where you could take two audio devices, not just single devices, but two complex devices, and pass a whole lot of video and audio backwards and forwards in real time with no negligible loss of anything, anywhere. Some DAWs were not very good at handling that. Others looked good on the surface and then became clunky as all banana peel. I think in many ways, on the surface at least, Traction were probably the winners in how it glued together. Unfortunately, Traction turned out not to be a very easy DAW to work in. ReWire was just finished up because it's an old technology, and the technology of the DAW has moved along so far. The things that drove ReWire, its needs, and what made it so great are now not really relevant, so they canned ReWire and instead took the rack into a VST format, hence the ability to load it over and over. Whereas ReWire was a one-shot thing, so you had access to Reason as a parallel program, and ReWire just moved audio and MIDI backwards and forwards. The rack, the Reason rack, the RRP, actually allows you to use instruments and effects from Reason just as though it were the rack, but kind of. It obviously doesn't work the same because it's not within the Reason environment. So to think that you get exactly the same would be flawed thinking. In terms of what you get with the software, the instruments, all the code, all everything is exactly the same. I do tend to feel, people will try and tell me, but this is how I feel, that the instruments don't quite sound the same in different DAWs. This is because I do firmly believe that different DAWs have different ways of handling audio. People go, they all sound the same based on a null test. And yeah, that's fine, your null test, I'm not debating that. But your null test is not this. Maybe one day I'll finally get round to making something that's made so that it can't by nature sound different in a different DAW, and see if it really does end up sounding different, but I always feel like it does. So this here, I feel would be brighter, clearer, little less tubby, but there's a feeling of warmer in other DAWs, which sometimes I'm like, oh, but, and it's like, whatever. That said, while it's easy to think, oh, but Reason's going to sound better in another DAW, I often struggle to mix as well. If I've rendered the tracks, yeah, not really an issue, but if I'm bringing in all the same instruments, I often feel like it's a little muddy. But I always felt like things were a little muddy whenever I mixed in VST DAWs, which I did for a very, very long time. Nonetheless, they are minor things, and sort of by the by, but it is a thing. So here is our first sound. We have a Europa sound, which I made just on the fly as I was sitting here doing this, a quartet, which we talked about, and a channel EQ. We'll look at that a little bit more next time when we get a look into mixing, but this is the extracted version. I showed you the channel strip that it exists, and this is that extracted into a rack extension format. So it lives as a natural in the rack as well. Most of the features of the SSL mixer channel can be put into here. So we have our core sound. Now originally I made it with extra things. So it was the full box and dice with the echo and a reverb. Now this allows me to show off something that I talked about and wrote on the screen that you could do, in the sense that this reverb I tend to find a little too sterile for my personal taste. So this is showing you how you can take something that you don't necessarily want it that way and turn it into something different with the magic of wiring. So I take my sound, we'll get rid of the echo, and we'll actually get rid of this as well. And we can hear that there is a reverb. I can pull that out. So that's the reverb that we're listening to, and I can bypass the chorus. It's a bit difficult because of the transition, but it becomes richer, more mobile. The way that I have achieved this is, as I said, just through wiring. It used to be that you used spiders for this, but this is a simple task, so I can use the new gain tool from Reason 13. I take the audio out from wherever it's coming from before, I wire that to the main input here, and I have to remember flip rack here. So see, output, input wired here. There are then two sets of outputs. So there's this, which is connected to here, and then there's a second one, which is connected to here. So I've made a parallel. So we've got the original signal going through, just moving forward as one would anticipate, but I've broken out a version of that to create a parallel here inside the rack, and that parallel goes through this chorus. This is one of the very first effects, and this chorus, part of the reason I use it is it has a send mode. In other words, it drops the dry signal, you only hear the wet, which makes more sense in this application, and from there, that goes into this reverb. So chorus to reverb, reverb to here. So the reverb has got this chorus on the front of it. It's not quite the same as a chorus or modulation inside, but it's better than not. It changes things and gives me the results that I want. Now here, the signal comes in. As you see, I've got the ability to mix it. I can pull in the dry, control click still works, and then I can pull in wet. You can see that I've got one signal coming in here, two signals going out here. That's the split, and this is the merge. One signal coming in, another signal coming in, and I can change their levels here. And just a merge signal coming back out. There's another way you can use the crossfade thing, but I'd rather use this than that, because you can lose level. And I can turn that off entirely, just switching it out. And hear how it becomes richer. I personally really like a very, very rich reverb. But if I wanted a particular VST in the middle of this sound, Reason Rack as a DAW will accept VSTs. I would just put it in the rack. There. Backwards and forwards, RE, VST, stock unit, whatever, all handle the same. But the rack will not load VST. It's fair enough, it sooner or later would become recursive and problematic and crashy as, well, crash. So we can then, using, in this case, Reaper, add in a VST, but it requires a little bit of thinking. So I pulled apart, and I'll show you some of how I did that, the chain that I had, put in another version of the reason rack, and put this guy in the middle. No phaser. Phaser. Nothing against this, but this phaser is not the equal of sweeper, but that wasn't what this was about. This was just about saying, look, this is a limit. You can't put VST into the rack. Now, we can use the reason rack all the way across a DAW session. I'm just showing you here with a pre-built sound. Now, let's say we wanted to create a send. Insert new track. All right, so we've got this new track. And I want it to have some receives. Track routing window. I want this to have receives from all tracks in this case. So let's set up some sends. They've got an automatic default of -12, which I set because that's what Reason does, because that's zone. It's not the only way of doing it, but that's the way that I do it. If I go back up here, you can see signal coming into here. The plan here was to say, well, okay, this is going to be for a reverb send. We'll remove this guy. We'll remove this guy. Now, I'm going to want to add a reason rack effect. Really important to make sure that this is an effect. You can put the instrument version in, but you're going to have some difficulties. Now, I could rebuild the thing that I had before. I guess I could even save what I had before off as a preset, but that strikes me as a fail. So I've got this. I'm going to open this guy here. I want to keep the echo because that's specific to the instrument. Now I'm going to right click here and copy devices. I could go cut them, but that seems just a little enthusiastic. Open this one here, right click, paste devices. So we can wire our signal from the host, so that's coming into the plugin, and then we've got to send it back to the host, back out of the plugin. So that would wire automatically, as I showed you in earlier videos, but because I've pasted, then it's not going to do that. So if I go back to here and play, if I solo this, we are hearing that. Open this up. Now I need to remove that and set this to full. Simply because it's become a send. If I unsolo that. So now we've got that reverb. And we can manage how much of it is sent or returned from here. And of course, we can also run our drums. And if we open this, hear how adding the chorus just warms that up. So now I've created a send, and I've showed you can copy and paste devices from within one Reason Rack instance to another. Really, really useful. So you don't be having to be saving off presets and stuff like that. I never do that. The other thing that I've got here is my masters. So these are set so that there's some compression, some equalizing, some maximizing, and just a little bit of roll off to make sure nothing clips. I can of course bypass the whole thing there, or I can bypass each of these individually. I can also mute things by turning it off. It may or may not make as much sense in the rack as a VST to have this off thing, but it's good that it's there because, well, I guess if you're used to it, you'd miss it if it was not, and if not, doesn't really matter. So this works well. I can carry my mastering processes that I'm used to over into here, and they work just dandy. So from there, it's a case of just knowing your DAW of choice, how to make it work. But you do need to be aware that there are some limits with this. The first, obviously, is you need to use the correct plugin version. And I learned that very much the hard way, because as I was building this, I just grabbed the RRP, the Reason Rack thing, and put it in. So I would have had all plugins and Reason or whatever, and just grabbed it. But there are two very discrete versions. If you end up using the Reason Rack plugin in a role where it's used as an effect, it will it'll pipe through the raw audio. So the reason I started to notice it, I was a bit funny when I was doing effect stuff, but on my masters I was blowing my levels, and it was like, Reason never blows its levels when I've got things set right, which I've got set right. And then I realized what had happened. I was about to phone a friend on it, actually, and then it was like, hang on. So make sure, if it's an instrument, I don't know whether it matters which version you use, but you're probably going to want to use the Reason Rack. It's that one there. If, however, it is just for effects, then you've got to use the plugin effect version. It won't tell you, it won't warn you. You will just find that if you bypass everything, or even just switch it to off, like if we use this off option, you'll find the raw audio still coming through, which is handy in a sense, because then you can check to see if you're being a doofus. But that is the first thing to be aware of. You must be sure you use the correct VST version. I do not believe that's Reason's fault. This is the nature of VST as far as I'm aware. Once you get that right, then everything works exactly as expected. As I've said, there is no VST within the Reason Rack plugin. I can add any device. I've got the browser, so anything that's a standard Reason thing, I can add a third-party device. It's like I could add this guy. It's a rack extension, but there is no way, like you can see, there are no VST in here at all. Well, I understand it, it is a functional limit, but obviously one they must have considered, and as I say, it's probably to do with reliability and what have you. Not all VST are made equal. Everything within the Reason Rack is, as much as possible, made equal. You don't get into the Reason store, you don't get into the rack without having something that obeys the Dalek master. So it does mean, like where I showed you here, that you can find yourself having to split your rack. So that one's the instrument version, that's the effect version. This is just a thing you're going to have to come to terms with. You lose your key commands to a great extent. A few of them still work, but a lot of them get hijacked by, in this case, Reaper. Whether that's going to work in all DAWs, I don't know, but I've been caught many times with hijacked key commands. I understand it, because this is now a secondary thing as far as the DAW is concerned. So you do have to do a lot of things using this and using this. That to me obviously feels like a real backwards step. People are used to that if they're very VST driven, but I'm just so used to Reason being all part of the same thing. There's no appreciable difference between any part of Reason and any other part of Reason. Whereas in your typical VST DAW, there are these sort of layers, because a VST is a whole other program sitting on top of it, made by some random dude. Probably French or something. Don't write me about that, I'm just joking. The French are great in France. No, really just messing with you. So just be aware that key commands and some of the workflow is not the same. I may be wrong on this, but my understanding is there's no MIDI out. So if you have done something like used a player or whatever, something that's generating MIDI, you can see there's no print to track, you lose that. And my understanding, at least from talking to Logic people, that there is no MIDI out. Whether that's going to come is a whole other thing. A lot of that, I believe, is to do with MIDI out and the VST3 spec being a little less than in agreement with each other. That may change. I really don't know, but just be aware if you're thinking, oh, I'll get those players and I can drive diva with the players. No. But you do have a workaround, which I've told lots of people. I think it's messy as all well, but I use Reason as a DAW. If you are working in another DAW and you really, really dig the stuff that your players are creating for you, create the whole box and dice, the chain, use another synth, use Europa, use whatever, then save that all off, open it in Reason DAW, or just make it all in Reason DAW, I don't know, including using Diva, or whatever synth, insert whatever synth, and then print the MIDI. Export that as a MIDI file. I mean, that's dead easy, obviously, in Reason, assuming we were using Reason. You'd come to here and export MIDI file. It's a bit... And then you would drop said MIDI file here, and that's going to churn out all the processed notes, and you would have Diva as your synth of choice, and beep, 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 beep. Everybody is happy. It's entirely up to you which way you go. If you prefer another DAW, and it's just preference, then by all means do that. You've just got to try it, and there are a lot of how-tos for the major DAWs you're likely to use on the Reason help pages. So there's no real reason for you to get particularly caught up, head up, what have you. Oh, and somebody's going to say, oh, but can you do multiple arts? Yes. When you instance a new sound, actually, let's do one now. Let's create a virtual instrument on a new track, REA, Reason Rack plugin. That's the one we need, so we'll add this guy. It offers you the option between, do you want stereo or like a bazillion outs? I do not want a bazillion outs, thank you very much. Do you want the... No. You would have to look at your own DAW for routing rules and this, that, and the other. We can very easily make layers. That's one thing that this is really good for. So I can make an electric piano sound. Okay, cool. Now if I add another instrument, I shall just grab a subtractor because it's easy. You see, it automatically plays both at once. And you can set them up. So and face. So we can create layered stuff, or if we want to have more control over said layered stuff, then we could add a utility, which is, and I covered this before, but consider this as an extra because it's really the end of the main program. The old line mixer, I'm going to shift click to put him in because I don't want any wiring. So now I will trash all my wiring for the moment. I know that I want my mixer, which I can actually just drag up top now. I'm going to want that to go to my main arts. There's no audio coming in. I want my piano going to 1 and my pad going to 2. Let's say I want some... Nice. I rather like the sound, at least in headphones. There's that nice sort of faux Asian sound. The fact that I'm playing all the black keys helps that. And then, of course, if I wanted to add some more loveliness to it, then we would add echo. Now I'm going to shift click again, because otherwise this will automatically add this as a send effect. This is not the outcome I want. You can do whatever you like, but I go from here to there. A little bit of the old quartet. And that should be wired after this. So I can shift and drag there. So now it'll be quartet to obviously over chorus. Let's go subtle. And if I decided I wanted to add my favorite reverb from my favorite developer, let's see what we've got in here. Too hard, can't find squat in here. I'm going to go with my second favorite developer, who's actually me too. The old Hertz multiplier. Let's go with the VST3 version, because VST3 is just cooler because it's got a bigger number. So now I've added a little bit of reverb. Maybe a little bit is is enthusiastic. Bearing in mind there is that reverb there as well. I'm going to go back and find it, see it's switched itself out. I might just move that out. Okay. And I challenge any other DAW as stock to have anything as powerful synth sound-wise. Yes, there are some individual synths which are impressive, but in terms of anything that can do all of this as easily as this, with sound effects and this, that, and the other, giving you access to even samples and all kinds of stuff, I'm not sure there's anybody who's quite the same. To achieve this kind of thing, you're either going to run a DAW with something like Reason as the rack, or you're going to run a DAW with something like Falcon, Omnisphere, or whatever. That's up to you which way you choose to go, but this is as good as anything. I impress myself.